From being freakishly tall to tolerating pain like it's nothing to never catching diseases that should kill you, Industrial Revolution descendants have genuinely bizarre abilities. And spoiler alert, while some make you unstoppable, others are why half your relatives are workaholics and the other half can't digest dairy. But here's what's insane. Just 150 years of factory life, 6 or 7 generations, literally rewired human biology in measurable ways. Different immune systems, altered brain chemistry. Researchers found that 30 to 40% of people in developed nations carry these specific genetic modifications. Pain receptors, stress response, all different. So, if your ancestors ground it out in industrial cities during the 1800s, you didn't just inherit their work ethic. You got biological upgrades and some pretty dark trade-offs. Let's start with what you can see in the mirror. You know how some families are just tall? Not genetics. Diet. During the Industrial Revolution, starting in the 1760s, something wild happened. Factory workers' kids got access to food their ancestors could only dream about. Sugar from Caribbean plantations, tea from India, wheat from American colonies, all flooding into industrial cities at prices working families could actually afford. Before this, if you were a peasant in rural England, you ate whatever grew within walking distance. Porridge, turnips, maybe some bread if you were lucky. But factory workers? They had options. The average height in Britain jumped by nearly 5 inches between 1800 and 1900. 5 inches in 100 years. That's insane. Researchers found that industrial city kids were eating protein-rich diets their grandparents never touched. The meatpacking industry made beef and pork cheaper than ever. Canned goods meant fish could travel inland. Suddenly, growing bodies had the fuel they actually needed. Studies show populations with Industrial Revolution ancestry, especially Northern European lineages, are among the tallest in the world today. Dutch people average 6'1" for men. Scandinavians aren't far behind. Germans, Brits, Americans from industrial Northeast cities, all tall, all descended from workers who ate like kings compared to their peasant ancestors. So next time someone asks why your family could field a basketball team, you can thank the British Empire's global trade networks and factory wages that made imported calories accessible. Pretty wild, right? But height is just the beginning. And then there's the pain thing. The pain thing. People with Industrial Revolution ancestry have measurably higher pain tolerance. Not metaphorically, literally different brain chemistry. Researchers discovered that populations with 150-plus years of industrial exposure have different endorphin receptor densities compared to populations that stayed rural. Why? Child labor. During the 1800s, kids as young as 7 operated dangerous machinery in textile mills, coal mines, and steel factories. Crushed fingers were common. Burns from hot metal happened daily. Machinery accidents could take off a hand before anyone noticed. And here's the brutal part. If you couldn't push through the pain and keep working, you got fired. Your family didn't eat. The workers who survived, who kept their jobs, who fed their families. They were the ones whose bodies could handle getting hurt and just keep going. That's evolutionary pressure right there. Modern pain threshold studies back this up. When scientists test people from different ancestries, descendants of industrial workers consistently report lower pain sensitivity. They need higher doses of anesthesia during surgery. They wait longer before taking pain medication. Their brains literally process pain signals differently. So next time you stub your toe and barely flinch, thank your 12-year-old coal miner, great-great-great-grandpa, who had to ignore broken ribs to keep his job. But it's not just physical pain. Factory workers dealt with constant loss. watching co-workers die in accidents, burying kids who didn't survive harsh conditions. The ones who could compartmentalize that trauma and show up the next day, they're your ancestors. Emotional pain tolerance runs in the blood. Pretty crazy adaptation, right? Of course, nothing this cool comes without a price, but here's where it gets weird. Your ancestors survived plagues that should have killed them. Cholera outbreaks in overcrowded factory housing, typhoid from contaminated water supplies, tuberculosis spreading through poorly ventilated workshops. Industrial cities in the 1800s were disease factories, and the workers who made it through? Their immune systems went into overdrive, and now you can't eat gluten. Between 1800 and 1900, urban populations faced constant exposure to deadly pathogens. No antibiotics, no vaccines, just your body versus whatever nasty bug was making the rounds. The evolutionary pressure was insane. People whose immune systems could mount aggressive responses to threats survived. Everyone else didn't. Fast forward to today. Descendants have hyperreactive immune systems. Medical studies show autoimmune disorder rates are 2 to 3 times higher in populations with industrial city ancestry. Celiac disease, Crohn's disease, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, all conditions where your immune system attacks your own body. The mechanism is straightforward. When you breed an immune system to fight everything aggressively for 5 or 6 generations, it doesn't know how to turn off. There's no more cholera in your drinking water, but your body is still on high alert. And sometimes it decides gluten is the enemy, or peanuts, or your own thyroid. Turns out, when you train your immune system to fight constant infections, it starts fighting things that aren't actually dangerous. Your great-great-grandmother survived literal plague. You get hives from shellfish. Thanks, evolution. The irony is devastating. Your ancestors had bulletproof immune systems that kept them alive in conditions that would kill most people today. And you inherited that same aggressive immunity, except now it's attacking your joints because you ate a sandwich. And the immune system isn't the only thing that got rewired. That rewiring. Industrial ancestry equals higher addiction rates, not willpower, not moral failing, dopamine receptors. Starting in the late 1700s, factory workers got access to stimulants their ancestors never touched. Coffee became cheap enough for working families, tea flooded in from colonial imports. Tobacco was everywhere. Later, alcohol production ramped up to industrial scale. Suddenly, brains that evolved in quiet farming villages were getting hit with constant chemical stimulation. Genetic research shows populations with industrial exposure developed mutations in dopamine receptor genes. Their reward, systems adapted to expect regular hits of external stimulation. Workers needed coffee to stay awake during 14-hour shifts. They needed alcohol to deal with physical pain and psychological stress. The ones whose brains could handle this constant chemical input, they survived and reproduced. Modern consequence? Descendants have significantly higher rates of addiction vulnerability. Alcohol dependency runs about 30% higher in industrial ancestry populations. Nicotine addiction recovery rates are lower. Opioid addiction hits harder, and then there's metabolism. Type 2 diabetes and obesity rates skyrocket in industrial lineages. Before the 1800s, sugar was a luxury most people never tasted. Then, industrial sugar production made it accessible. White flour, refined grains, cheap candy. Bodies that evolved in scarcity mode suddenly had abundance. Your ancestors' bodies learned to store every calorie because famine could hit any time. That was smart strategy for 10,000 years. Problem is, lean times never came. Industrial food production meant constant availability. But your metabolism is still stuck in 1843, hoarding energy like the potato blight might come back tomorrow. Studies show industrial ancestry populations have insulin resistance rates nearly double that of populations that stayed agricultural longer. So, when you can't stop snacking or you're pre-diabetic at 30, that's not weakness. That's your body following instructions written during the Industrial Revolution. But the most fascinating changes happened in the brain itself. Industrial Revolution descendants have different brain wiring, not metaphorically, literally different neural pathways. Child labor during the 1800s meant kids as young as 8 operated complex machinery in textile mills and factories. These weren't simple tasks. They had to monitor multiple moving parts, predict mechanical failures, spot patterns in production errors, all while staying alert enough to avoid getting killed. That kind of cognitive demand during critical brain development periods? It rewired neural circuits. Neuroscience research shows this created advantages. Descendants of industrial workers score significantly higher on pattern recognition tests, visual spatial reasoning, and mechanical problem solving. Brain scans reveal increased gray matter density in regions responsible for processing complex systems. There's a reason engineering, architecture, and technical fields are dominated by people from industrial ancestry backgrounds. Creativity rates are higher, too. Studies tracking professional artists, inventors, and designers found that nearly 60% have documented industrial worker ancestry. The neuroplasticity that came from adapting to dangerous, chaotic factory environments translated into brains that excel at finding novel solutions. So if you're weirdly good at fixing things without instructions, or you can look at a broken system and immediately see the problem, thank your 10-year-old ancestor who had to figure out jam-prone looms on the fly or get fired. But that brain flexibility came with a cost. Mental illness runs significantly higher in families with industrial ancestry. Anxiety disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, all elevated. The same neural adaptability that makes you creative also makes you vulnerable to psychological conditions. Brains wired for constant vigilance don't turn off easily. Your ancestor had to spot which machine was about to malfunction. You have to spot which coworker might be annoyed at you. Same neural pathways, different context. And that cost shows up in some pretty dark ways. Mental illness runs in families with industrial ancestry. Not occasionally, consistently. Psychological research shows anxiety disorders appear at rates 40% higher in populations descended from industrial workers. Depression rates elevated by 35%. PTSD, bipolar disorder, OCD tendencies, all significantly more common. Factory life between 1760 and 1914 was psychological horror. Children watched coworkers die in machinery accidents. Families lived in overcrowded tenements where disease killed neighbors weekly. Workers operated under constant threat of injury, starvation, and death. That level of sustained trauma doesn't just affect the person experiencing it. Epigenetic research has proven this. Trauma literally changes gene expression, and those changes get passed down through generations. When your great-great-great-grandmother watched her sister get crushed by factory equipment at age 12, her body responded by altering stress hormone regulation. Those alterations showed up in her children's DNA, and their children's DNA, and yours. The mechanism is cortisol regulation. Industrial workers lived in constant fight-or-flight mode. Their bodies pumped out stress hormones non-stop. Over generations, descendants developed hypersensitive stress responses. Depression rates follow similar patterns. Industrial cities were dark, polluted, overcrowded. Workers spent 12 to 16 hours a day in windowless factories. Vitamin D deficiency was universal. Seasonal affective disorder? That's your body remembering generations of winter in smoke-filled cities with barely any daylight. This isn't weakness. This isn't being broken. It's carrying scars you didn't earn, passed down like height or eye color. Factory owners got rich. Workers got traumatized. Descendants inherited the bill. But even trauma has side effects. Those same stress-adapted brains also make you incredibly resilient under actual pressure. Studies show industrial ancestry populations perform better in high-stress careers and recover faster from real disasters. Your brain is calibrated for chaos. It just doesn't know the difference between factory floor danger and modern workplace stress. So, what does all this mean for you today? Here's how this shows up in your actual life. Can't stop working? That's not ambition. That's genetic memory of 12-hour factory shifts, where stopping meant starvation. Workplace research shows descendants of industrial workers report significantly higher rates of workaholism and guilt about taking breaks. Your body thinks rest equals death. Punctuality obsession, factory whistles, workers who showed up late got fired. Being on time wasn't courtesy. It was survival. That anxiety you feel about being 3 minutes late to a casual meeting? That's your great-great-grandfather's terror of missing the morning whistle. Food cravings make more sense, too. If you constantly crave sugar, salt, and fatty foods, that's not lack of willpower. That's your metabolism still seeking calorie density because for 6 generations, your family never knew when the next meal was coming. You know what's crazy? Some people fall apart under pressure while others thrive in chaos. Industrial descendants consistently perform better in high-stress jobs. Emergency medicine, crisis management, combat roles, all dominated by people whose ancestors were bred for operating under constant threat. Urban versus rural preferences track ancestry too. If you feel more comfortable in cities with noise and crowds and constant stimulation, that makes sense. Your ancestors spent generations in dense industrial environments. Quiet rural settings actually make some descendants anxious. Sleep patterns show up weird. Night owl tendencies correlate with industrial ancestry because factories ran multiple shifts. Your body might literally be more comfortable with disrupted sleep schedules. Community values run deep. If your family has strong union sympathies or instinctive collective action tendencies, that's not random politics. That's inherited memory of how workers survived. Solidarity wasn't philosophy, it was survival strategy. You're not a workaholic. You're genetically optimized for industrial capitalism. Congrats. But here's the craziest part about all of this. All of this happened in just 150 years. That's nothing. 6 or 7 generations. Normal evolutionary adaptations take thousands of years, sometimes tens of thousands. Humans spent 200,000 years evolving to hunt and gather. We spent 10,000 years adapting to agriculture. And then, in a span shorter than the United States has existed as a country, the Industrial Revolution rewired significant portions of human biology. The speed is actually terrifying. Population estimates suggest roughly 30 to 40% of people in developed nations have direct industrial worker ancestry. That's billions of people walking around with these specific genetic modifications. Highest concentrations are in the UK, Germany, northeastern United States, and parts of Eastern Europe. Basically, anywhere factories dominated between 1760 and 1914. To sum it up, you might be taller, tougher, more creative, better at handling stress, and simultaneously more anxious, more prone to addiction, more likely to have autoimmune disorders, and metabolically stuck in scarcity mode even though you live in abundance. You're a walking contradiction of evolutionary advantages and costs, and here's the kicker. It's still happening. Right now, the digital revolution is doing something similar. People born after 1995 are showing measurable differences in attention spans, dopamine regulation, and social bonding patterns. In another 150 years, researchers might be making videos about abilities you inherit if your bloodline goes back to the smartphone era. Evolution doesn't stop. We're just living through the latest chapter. And don't even get me started on what happened if your bloodline goes back to the Viking Age, or the Roman Empire, or the Bronze Age collapse. Every major upheaval in human history left genetic fingerprints that somebody alive today is carrying around. Your family tree isn't just names and dates. It's a genetic instruction manual written in factory smoke, child labor, and survival against impossible odds. Pretty wild way to think about who you are, right?